Yay, we're live. And you know what? I've noticed there's always a lag between when I say we're live and it shows that we're live before. So if you've been watching my face like this, welcome. Claire Wasserman here, founder and author of Ladies Get Paid. We are an educational platform, global community, and a book all about helping women earn more, live better. And if you've been following along, you know that I love to talk to other women about how they're also helping their communities earn more and live better, approaching it from different angles. We get all kinds of people on here. Super jazzed to have Keren Eldad here with us today. She's come highly, highly recommended. I'm going to give you a super brief bio of Keren, although she's going to go into more detail. But before I do that, just so you all know, the focus of today's conversation it's pretty big. So it's about how to blast past the sham that is imposter syndrome. Okay, this is Keren's word, so she's going to tell us what she means by it being a sham, and then rise to true economic power without Machiavellian antics, nor the sacrifice of our souls. Couldn't get all of that into the title of today's LinkedIn Live, but that is the focus. Let's see if we can do it in 30 minutes. So Keren, welcome. Brief bio for you, and then I'm going to have you talk more about what you do exactly. Keren is an acclaimed motivational speaker, leadership psychology expert, and the founder of With Enthusiasm, where she provides world-class personal and professional coaching. She had a whole business career before this. So I know the work that she does with coaching is extremely personal to her, and has really guided her in how she is a support system for other folks. Keren, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Claire. It is a joy to be here, and it's a joy to be talking about money.
Yeah. So if we could just jump right into your rock bottom, if you don't mind, because I know that was part of your bio. I didn't read it. I want you to tell us about it. Just the pivot point from when you went working for other people to deciding not only to work for yourself, but to actually make your career about helping other women find the right paths for themselves.
I don't think that the trauma was about working for other people, although it was certainly part of my trajectory. It was really about being married to someone who didn't honor who I was as a person, making that choice, by the way, and about relegating my financial acuity and ability to manage my own money to another person. And this is something that's extraordinarily common with women, particularly common with women and minorities, just according to the research that I have found. And I have decided with my life not only to demonstrate how to end it, but to show other people how they can put an end to it as well. And let's relive the trauma, okay? So picture it. It's 2012, and Keren has done everything right with her life. I've been a really good girl who went to the right schools, who then marries a tall man, which, as we know, is the absolute standard for life, and who is now working in a management position at a huge billion-dollar firm in the industry of luxury, which, according to The Devil Wears Prada, was also the correct luxury. So check, 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 and check. Also, big house, nice lighting fixtures everywhere. Really, I've gone above and beyond, Claire. I have done everything appropriately, and let's also mention that I've kept my weight at an acceptable rate. I'm about 31 years old at this time when it starts to dawn on me that I hate everything about my life. The house, which was actually very big and very beautiful for the time, was in Zurich, which was, for those of us who are New Yorkers, a city that really never stops stopping. The exact opposite of New York. Very sleepy town, very boring, very conservative, not for me in any way, shape, or form. And to this day, by the way, I'm open in my criticism of Zurich. So if anybody out there is like down in Switzerland, go ahead. Let's have a conversation. I would love to. The husband was tall, and that is probably the only nice thing I can say about him. He was abusive. He was, I think, in many ways, not only immoral towards me, but just overall completely unaligned in our values. I think that's a nice way of saying it. And really, it was just a nasty, mean time in which I endured abuse again and again and again, from shutting down to saying really horrible things to me on a consistent basis. And during this time, I also found that my career, while it was a genuinely nice career, was definitely not a career in which I felt like I was in my zone of genius or waking up eager for the day or super excited and feeling maxed out in my potential. So I have this sleepy feeling that like something is off and I can't really put my finger on it. By the way, I think I was 34 at the time, not 31. So even more egregious. And so this is when I started asking pretty big questions. And then I decided to get divorced. Really, it was inevitable, quite frankly. And this is when the financial aspect comes into play. Because technically, even though I have the big house and everything looks good, I'm broke as a joke. I've spent most of it on Prada. I was mismanaging money. And I also relegated a lot of the responsibilities of accumulating money, of taking care of money, and of managing money to my husband, as so many people did. And guess what I found out in the divorce? He's not that good with money either. So then I end up thinking, all right, well, this is a bad situation that's turned into a catastrophe. And this is also when I start to realize, number one, there is no way I'm ever letting anybody have responsibility over my financial situation ever again. There is no reason for a person who is capable to not be able to manage what is basic arithmetic, truly. And earnership, we're not even talking about earning what you are capable of earning. And number two, there is no reason why anyone should relegate that responsibility either and feel beholden in a relationship for your financial wellness, which is essentially the core of your well-being, within and outsource that. And this is actually first when I become very passionate about managing my own destiny and having autonomy. That's what this represents. And secondly, where I decided that I should really blast past my perceived limitations. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome, get over it, and get rich. And why I want absolutely every woman on the planet to do the same.
Oh my goodness, there's so much to unpack here. What were the first steps, when you realized, okay, this is where I'm at. It's not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
It's not what I thought it was going to be. The early days of
the first step
to a better place.
The first step is the nastiest. And the first step is admitting that you've made a horrible, horrible mistake and that you've actually portrayed something that is inaccurate to the world. I was dishonest. I was wearing Prada when I was broke as a joke. I had no business buying that shit or trying to keep up with society in that way. I also had to recognize that while I was judging other friends for playing it safe, they were technically doing the right thing and taking ownership of their lives and responsibility. They were not relegating to others. They were not telling themselves stories about what they were doing right so they could stay sheltered in some abusive exchange or Faustian bargain, if you will. Let's say it's not abusive, but you're still in a situation where you're actively and openly choosing to live like my cat, Waffles, basically a kept pet in your own home. Then that is a decision that you're making, and you have to be honest about that decision. You have to ask yourself whether it truly does work and whether it is sustainable. And by the way, my argument is a very feminist argument. It does not. It is not sustainable, and it doesn't help your soul because all of us want a fulfilled and max potential. So the first thing was to really admit that my choices had not served me, they had been a mistake, and that this was not good enough for me. And that was the beginning of searching for a more tenable way forward.
Out of curiosity, talk to me about sham. Why call imposter syndrome a sham?
So I call imposter syndrome a sham not because I dispute the validity of the psychological phenomenon. The psychological phenomenon, and by the way, it has been disputed even in Harvard Business Review, which has published, to my mind, more articles on IS than any other publication. But it's been consistently found in over 30 years of research, and actually over 40 years of research now. And it's also something that I have experienced with all my clients, men and women. So I would love to meet the exception to the universe, but I have not yet. At the same time, I call it a sham because it's bullshit. It's really a nonsensical bias that has been accumulated over years and years of conditioning. And this is very readily overcome if we're able to do what I just said, which is admit that there's a problem here, that there's something that we're displaying or projecting that is simply illogical or inaccurate. And if we have the desire to overcome it, we can overcome it. Mm-hmm. Imposter syndrome is a phenomenon. It is not a disease.
Let's maybe define it. So how do you, how would you?
So the academic definition of imposter syndrome works for me. And the academic definition is the feeling of fraudulence, feelings of inferiority, of fraudulence in stark contrast with all evidence in your life, especially your professional life. That is what imposter syndrome is. It's this feeling that you sign a contract, but they're going to catch you. They're going to find out that you're not as amazing as you say you are. And this is something that, again, while the research points to it being more prevalent in women and in minorities, I have yet to find a man in coaching who doesn't experience some form of this.
Yeah. I think maybe we're just more willing to admit it and also made to feel it.
Oh, absolutely.
If you're the only person in the room that looks like you, you're of course going to self-doubt. It's only natural.
Well, you also, I think women express it a little bit differently. I've found 4 ways that imposter syndrome is expressed, particularly in overachievers. And I think men express it slightly differently than women do.
Okay. Yeah. Tell us about the 4 ways of high achievers, and also how interesting that high achievers would feel imposter syndrome.
Oh yeah. Well, no, overachievers will disproportionately feel imposter syndrome. We are far more likely and far more conditioned to it. And this is a correlational finding, not a causal finding, but it makes a lot of sense. Think about it. When you become an achievement junkie, guess what happens when you don't achieve? Right. You're 10 times more likely to feel a zing, right? This is also why overachievers are more prone to addiction, more prone to depression, and more prone to anxiety, according to studies that came out of Stanford 10 years ago and several others. If you need citations, I'm always happy to present them. I'm just saying, what's really interesting for me is to share that in the more than 1,000 people I've worked with personally, including leaders at large corporations like Nike and LVMH and JP Morgan, you're always faced with people who will behave in 4 ways. The first is the most antithetical, I think, to our notion of imposter syndrome, and it's extreme bravado. I call it know-it-all syndrome. When they literally cannot admit that they are ever wrong or make a mistake, and not only put on pretenses, but wear insane armor, like posturing constantly that they've got this, right? When it's a very infallible type of posturing, you can be pretty certain that that person's concealing something. And mostly it's the fear of being the person who doesn't have the answers, being the person who is ashamed of having lacks or lapses in knowledge. That's imposter syndrome. And that will be called out because eventually they will sit with somebody who's an expert at whatever they're pontificating about, going, the fuck are you talking about? And that's usually very, very useful for them, but might actually move them into hyperdrive. The second kind is the perfectionist. This is a little bit more classical women imposter syndrome. And this is the idea that if you just measure up to this fictitious measuring stick that you created for yourself, probably around the time you were 12 and started monitoring your weight, then you beat the system and you're going to be just fine. And this becomes an obsession to just continue not only to keep up appearances, but to line up constantly with the top of the top. Again, very prevalent in overachievers, especially prevalent in women. And why is this imposter syndrome? Because the fear is, of course, that you won't measure up. And if you ever don't measure up, you're going to beat the crap out of yourself. By the way, Claire, here's a really important distinction. Perfectionism is not having high standards. I like to tell people all the time, having high standards is great. They don't hurt. I have high standards, but I'm not going to beat the crap out of myself if I miss the gym once or eat an extra piece of pie or my bank account dips. Perfectionists will. And so it's a very aggressive stance. And again, this is why it's imposter syndrome. It's because you're behaving like an imposter. You're constantly covering up to try to annihilate the sense that you are indefatigable. The third kind of imposter syndrome is neurotic imposter or analysis paralysis. This is very classic imposter syndrome. This is, you know what? I'm probably not going to make it anyway, so I might as well not start. And here are the 10 reasons why it's not going to go my way. This one is actually 50-50. You will find this exact same kind of imposter syndrome in men and women, and it has more to do with behavioral style. The behavioral styles that are more introverted, more methodical, more analytical will naturally gravitate towards this display of imposter syndrome. And the big buzzkill that is this kind of neurotic imposter or imposter syndrome is that it stops you before you start. So at least the other two kind of make an attempt sometimes, even though the perfectionist can sort of spill over into this category. But generally they'll stop before they even attempt something. And then of course there is my fourth archetype, and it's my personal favorite, and it's workaholism. Mm-hmm. What? Workaholism is a form of imposter syndrome? Yes. Think about it. If you thought you were doing a really good job, would you worry that if you ever stopped working, the entire ceiling would collapse?
Right.
No. So workaholism is another behavioral ramification or exhibit of imposter syndrome. And the reason I talk about these a lot, particularly with association with money and running a business, starting a business, is because you can naturally see how these behavioral impediments that are short-lived will stop you from building, will stop you from scaling, and will stop you from running a business effectively. Mm-hmm. So it's my hope to talk about these things first at the ground floor so that people can get past them.
Mm-hmm. When people come to you, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming they've self-identified. I mean, maybe not as articulately as you have with these archetypes, but they know they have a problem, right? Otherwise they wouldn't seek out the coaching.
No.
Okay. I'm always curious to hear about surprises, when people are surprised to discover things about themselves.
They're always surprised to discover things about themselves. We have always, really, in every single case in coaching, they're called blind spots for a reason. And most of the time when you come across a blind spot and you go, oh, it's like insane. And that happens to coaches too. Just so you know, we hire coaches ourselves. We fall back into scarcity loops. And then it takes another coach saying, what are you doing? To go, oh my God, I'm doing it again, aren't I? And it's a really amazing thing. Human behavior is like this. I think most of us are a little bit like raccoons. Everything shiny kind of gets our attention. We fall into just habitual patterns and we just stop examining. There are two cases in which people will come to coaching. The more common case is I want to be more successful. It's not something's wrong.
Oh, okay.
It's I want to do more. I know I've got what it takes. Let's get this off the ground. And it's usually the ones who look like they have the Ferrari engine in them that you know are going to need a lot of eye-opening because they can't really see what's getting them. It's usually this drive. And again, it pushes from the first archetype of imposter syndrome, but they're experiencing it too. The second is, of course, a sense of overwhelm, a sense of almost like a pain in the darkness. They don't really understand what exactly is wrong, but they know something is wrong. And again, you will have to find exactly where they're rowing from. And these are generalizations. These are large swaths. People are much more complex than this, and it takes a while to get to know people and to sort of understand where their blind spot is. But it does help us get to the heart of the problem and say that there is one. And wherever you are, if you're experiencing one of two things, which is stagnant results, it's a repetition cycle, and you don't like your results, of course, or you're feeling off. You're feeling anywhere below the spectrum of aimlessness, all the way to perhaps even despair. There is something that you want to look at. You're not going to make it look better just because your Instagram posts are awesome.
Right. Or even accomplishing the thing that you think you want to accomplish, that also may not solve it either. Tammy asked a good question. Do you think we can develop imposter syndrome by watching our parents be this way? In other words, we become what we see. Of course, there's a complex answer to that, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
There is a complex answer to that. The coaching answer is a little bit different, Tammy, from the psychology answer. The psychology answer attributes enormous, and even the behavioral science schools attribute enormous importance to the parents' influence in our lives. But the coaching perspective is a little bit more reliant on not only the conditioning that you're picking up constantly from your society, but also that you are maintaining within yourself. In other words, we accept a lot of responsibility in what we are repeating and what we are willing to repeat and what we're getting out of that repetition. It is that anchoring that will give you the keys back to your own car. Because if you start saying, well, technically I did learn it somewhere, but I'm also kind of choosing to re-engage again and again and again, and I must be getting something out of this, you will begin to find a solution that will eventually first get you to challenge the premises that are stopping you, and second, get you to moving. Let's talk a little bit about my trauma. I did learn imposter syndrome patterns from my parents, of course. Example, it's better to be married than not married. It's way better to be employed and safe than not employed and safe. And who are you to show up in society? Keren, just tone it down a bit. I heard this since I was a little kid. It's much better to be appropriate than it is to be awesome. At 34, I'm married to this thing. I'm in a house that doesn't feel good and in a career that doesn't feel good. Was the first time, Tammy, that I looked around and went, really? Mm-hmm. Does this work? How's this working out? Because I'm headed towards a nice, big, broke dead end if I continue this pattern. It actually isn't working. So what if I decide to break the mold here? What if I decide to adopt humility? What if I decide to really go on an exploration? What if I decide to not be perfect for a very long time and allow people to see and judge my mistakes? What if I decide to do something that's truly outrageous for a woman, which is to become rich and loud? Mm-hmm. And P.S., it worked. So it's my hope that no matter where it comes from, you understand that you can readily overcome it. And that's the more important message.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to ask in regards to the getting rich part, but that's a whole other conversation. I know that part of our title is Rise to True Economic Power Without Sacrificing Your Soul. So, though we only have a few minutes for this, what are some things that have been helpful in your journey in regards to the money part?
Well, I want to tell you about 4 ways to blast past this. This is really, really important, or how it affects people's power. And every woman who's listening and hears something that syncs up with her, it might actually make her make a change. And that will be very important and very happy for me to know that other women out there are like, you know what? Give me my purse. I'm ready to go. That's going to make me very, very happy. So the first thing that it affects is your inability to leave a shitty relationship or to rely on anybody else to manage your finances. This is imposter syndrome classic. Screw that. It is basic arithmetic. Investing, do not be blinded by the silly acronyms, is something that it can readily be you can easily start to just invest in some index funds and help somebody manage your management of money, even with teeny tiny little deposits in a giant fund like Elvest. The second thing that I want to say is this also affects pay for time. It keeps us locked, imposter syndrome, in this idea that unless we are charging for an appropriate amount of time, this is something we learned in corporate, or for an exact market value, we are somehow overstepping our worth. This is ridiculous. You are paid for your experience and expected results. And if you can blast past that, you will get rich. If you can't blast past that, you will not scale. You will not get rich. The third thing I want to say is imposter syndrome teaches us to stay in our lane, which makes us do number 3 and number 4. The first is not spending to save money. Mm-hmm. Spend money, save money, and not spending money to make money. And these are 2 huge problems. If anybody wants to rise to be rich, you're going to have to do both things. You're going to have to spend money to save money. Example, laundry takes up an enormous amount of your time. Guess what? Your time's worth money.
Right.
There is a more efficient way to do this. Not immediately. I didn't pay somebody to help me with my laundry immediately because I was broke as a joke. But eventually. Number 2, spend money to make money. This is something that all coaches believe in, obviously, because we're drinking the Kool-Aid. But technically, the vast majority of money that I spend in my business to this day is on coaching and skills, because those return with massive dividends. And that is what I've always been focused on. This is, again, something I was greatly discouraged from with my parents. They thought you should only spend money on what makes sense. But that's not it. It's really about doubling down on your own potential, because you only got one life.
Right. Seeing yourself as an investment.
Yeah.
What about daily practices when it comes to, self-doubt? I mean, I'm imagining there probably was a pretty big experience or moment where you did feel like you made a sizable shift past this stuff, but it's lifelong, right? So in those daily moments of self-doubt, how do you counsel yourself through it?
I have a mantra. It's be easy on yourself. You're doing better than you think. And in order to make that mantra true, because if you just repeat something you don't believe, it's not going to work, I do two things. Number one is I stay in the spiritual gym like my life depends on it, because it does. And that means the meditation and the books and the spiritual practices that I adopted along the way are something I never, ever skip. I learned that 7 years ago when I got myself out of this hole. And I believe with all my heart that the reaffirmation of the ideas is how I got rich. And the second is I never stop learning or growing. I am never not in coaching or an upgrading of my own life. This does not mean it's a gross addiction. This doesn't mean it's perpetual. It just means that you can always continue to expand, because the secret to money is starting to understand that it's cyclical. It's always regenerating. You're always in an earning pattern. So even if you go down, it's not particularly problematic. You'll be up again. And the only way you can do that is by continually moving in the game. And by the way, that's not just me saying this. That's Warren Buffett saying this. So it's worked for me. It's worked for my grandpa, Warren, and it will work for you too. I hope that that's useful, because all of us experience doubt, and all of us will take a hit emotionally when our finances dip or when things look bad. You must be stronger than that. You must be bigger than that. And in order to do that, you can rely only on your spirit, which is always going to be bigger than money.
Do you have any books and resources that you can recommend?
With immense pleasure. So my TikTok is at Coaching and Cats, and it's completely dedicated to book recommendations.
Oh, great.
And my top three, there are 3 books that I read all the time. They're part of the spiritual gym. The first is really weird, but whatever, it works. It's called Money Isn't the Problem, You Are by Gary Douglas. Okay. The second is You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero, that I hope a lot of people have read, and is very, very funny and changed my freaking life. And the third is Abraham Hicks, Money and the Law of Attraction. There are several others that I recommend on my channels. I constantly talk about them, but these are the 3 that really started to move me into bigger thinking, and I think ultimately helped me to become not just rich, but free.
Amazing. Unbelievable. So tell everybody, links to find you. I mean, for folks watching on the Ladies Get Paid YouTube and Facebook channels, come on over to Ladies Get Paid LinkedIn, because Keren's going to hop in after the recording. She's going to put her links in there. But tell us, where can people find you and follow you, and what you have coming up?
Well, the way most people communicate with me is on at Coach Keren on Instagram, and that's Keren with 2 E's. I like to say, not like the meme. And on KerenEldad.com, which is KerenEldad.com. These are the best ways to get in touch. There's tons of freebies. There's lots of ways to get a consultation. Just hop on it if you'd like to talk more, because again, we're all in this together, and no woman should be left behind.
Yeah. What do you have coming up next? I mean, there's so many things, or what are you focusing on that you're super excited about?
There's a lot going on at this moment, Claire. Honestly, I'm trying to wrap up the year. I've got a big retreat coming up next month, my business retreat, and then the reset retreat, which opens up our 2023 year. That's sort of the cycle. But right now, I am Israeli, as maybe you can hear from my accent. I've been truly consumed by the conflicts, and it's been my tremendous focus to help people through the grief and through the complex feelings that we're feeling on both sides in order to maneuver a very, very uncertain time.
Yeah, I wasn't sure with your name, but thank you for mentioning that. And if you have any resources that you want to add, once you pop back into the LinkedIn recording for folks, we're all looking for guidance, and you were so great. And as Tara McNabb posted in the comments, this was freaking fantastic, Keren. Thank you. So
it's my pleasure, Tara.
Couldn't have said it better. Feeling very fired up. And I also have to tell you, so I'm pregnant and expecting twins.
Mazel tov.
Thank you. And they were going crazy during this conversation. They were like, we'd like to love you, Coach Keren, boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl, great. Then I hope the girl is listening. Girl, you're going to be rich.
Yeah, they both they were like, we like Coach Keren. I was like, put it down. You're distracting
Maybe
me.
their generation won't experience imposter syndrome. How magnificent would that be?
I know. Well, listen, I mean, I've seen it already in the Ladies Get Paid community. I mean, I'm 36, almost 30. I'm 37 basically this month. So, and I found when I started the organization and these conversations with women talking about money, so many of them would say, this is the first time that I'm
Yeah.
talking about money out loud. Gen Z, no. There's no aha moments that they're having. They need guidance, of course, but they're not having this holy crap, I can't believe I'm speaking out loud about this
That
experience.
makes my heart sing. That absolutely
Yeah.
makes my heart sing. Who knows?
Yeah.
Maybe we are looking at equality in my lifetime.
Yeah. Well, we joke we're trying to put ourselves out of business on our company.
Yes, same.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen, so much. And good luck to you and to everybody watching now. Go get paid.
Real
Bye.
pleasure. Bye.